Good evening and welcome to the May 26, 2015 meeting of the Lake Forest Zoning Board of Appeals. The board is here tonight to work together with all of you, property owners, neighbors, and architects to continue the tradition that allows community members to work together to preserve the qualities and the unique character that make Lake Forest a special community. We recognize the personal importance of each petitioner's request. Our goal is to respect the request of the owner while balancing the interests of the community as a whole. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Zoning Board of Appeals, the board hears all requests for variations in zoning and special use permits. The City of Lake Forest is committed to conducting open meetings. To achieve that goal, the board has adopted meeting procedures that ensure that all parties have an opportunity to speak. The procedures are detailed on the agendas available at the back of the room. This meeting is also broadcast on cable television. Speaking on behalf of the entire board and city staff, our goal is to move each petition through the review process as quickly as possible, while at the same time balancing the interests of the petitioners, neighboring property owners, and the larger community. So I'm going to start with an introduction of the board members and staff, but I'm going to start from my left today to give our newest board member a chance to catch his breath. Kevin, if you want to start.
Kevin Lewis, 3rd Ward.
Jay Kennedy, 4th Ward.
Bob Frankson, 1st Ward.
Lloyd Culbertson, 4th Ward.
Louis Pickus, 2nd Ward.
Mark Pasquazi, 4th Ward.
And with us from city staff tonight is Kathy Cerniak, Director of Community Development. The first item on the agenda is consideration of approval of the minutes from the January 26, 2015 meeting. Are there any comments to those minutes? I assume you all have them. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a request for approval of a front yard setback variance for a front porch on a new residence located at 786 Oakwood Avenue. The owners are David and Tiffany Bruskin. Representative is John Krasnodebski, architect. And if there is anybody intending to, or first, are there any declaration of conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts on that matter? Okay. Anybody intending to testify on this matter, if you stand, raise your right hand, swear you in. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Thank you. So we'll move into presentation by the petitioner, Mr. Krasnodebski.
Good evening, Chairman Frankson and fellow commissioners. My name is John Krasnodebski. I'm the architect for this project at 786 Oakwood, and I'm joined here tonight by the property owners, David and Tiffany Bruskin. And this home is a new construction. We plan on removing the existing home and building a new home. And we're here tonight specifically for a front porch variance. And the front porch, I'll start out with some pictures of the neighborhood. So these are 4 photographs of the neighborhood. And the front, the top left is a street view looking north. You can see it's a combination of mostly residential, mostly homes, and a little bit of commercial space. There's a parking lot across the street, but it's mostly residential. The project that we're talking about tonight is the one with this picket fence in front. Here's a view looking south. And here's a view. It's actually an intersection of Wisconsin and Oakwood. And here's a view looking to the southeast. Here are some pictures of the home. And this is a nice photograph of Wisconsin looking towards the home. As you can see, it dead ends into the Bruskins' property here. There's a driveway that enters alongside the existing home, and there's a garage, a detached garage at the end. So here's a site plan of our proposed project. The dashed line represents the property line, and the heavy line is the new home. I've cross-hatched where the front porch is. So that's where we're here tonight, is to ask for a variance for this front porch. It encroaches into the front yard setback by approximately 6 feet. The required setback is 40 feet. I've drawn the line of 40 feet right at the front of the new home. So the new home itself is conforming to all setbacks. All other parts of the home do conform to the setbacks, the side yards, the rear yards, the garage setbacks, and so forth. So it's just purely this front porch, and it's an open front porch, so it's constructed of wood. It has wood columns. It's a one-story porch. It's virtually transparent. You kind of see through it. You can see the house beyond it. The porch does wrap around the home, but the wraparound portion is conforming. Right now, the existing house non-conforms by quite a bit. It's actually 18 feet from the property line, and what's required is 40. So we are setting the house quite a bit further back. It is an additional 22 feet back. So as part of our project, we're also proposing to remove the picket fence and provide some screening with some evergreen shrubbery alongside the whole sidewalk. So it's going to really soften the streetscape, soften the new home, and soften the whole property. We're also going to remove the driveway. We feel that by removing that, it's going to really open up some green space, let some more plantings are able to be planted. I think it's also going to provide a much safer access to the home so that no traffic is going to be coming and going alongside Oakwood and Wisconsin, which can be a busy intersection during rush hours. So I think that's really a plus for the project in the neighborhood to kind of take that traffic off the street. It's going to be much safer coming and going to the house. So access to the garage is going to be solely via the back alleyway, kind of a unique aspect of the property that there are many detached garages alongside this alley. And so this will be more in keeping with what's going on in the neighborhood right now. So I do have a streetscape of surrounding properties that show how these setbacks compare. So this is a diagram that shows the neighboring properties. This is 786 Oakwood, somewhat in the middle. You can see how the T of Wisconsin ties into it. So the setback line is dashed in at 40 feet here, and as you can see, most of the properties are non-conforming, whether they're new or old. They have substantial portions overreaching that 40-foot setback. Now, we're asking for this setback because we think it is more consistent to have this house in this location with the neighborhood. And we do feel a porch is a really great design element that is going to make it more in character with all the other homes that are in the neighborhood. There are many open porches and many non-conforming porches. The neighbor to the south has a porch that, and a substantial portion of the house that's non-conforming. So we feel that this is a somewhat normal characteristic in the neighborhood, and we feel that this offers a nice transition actually from 3 homes in a row that are pretty heavily non-conforming, and then it starts to step back and then really starts to relate to the newer home that's to the north. You can see as it turns the corner here, that home is non-conforming as well, and then this house has many non-conformities. This is the parking lot across the street. So we think that, we looked at alternatives, how can we push the house further back? But there are codes that require a distance between the home and the detached garage. So 10 feet is the minimum, and we're basically at the minimum. It's 12 feet. So making it 10 feet would still make the porch non-conforming. The garage is set back as far as possible on the property, so that can't be pushed any further back. So what we actually did is made the house wider but shallower, so that we could get as much square footage of the home into the conformance with the setbacks. So we feel with the landscaping plan that we've presented, we are offering some evergreen screening with evergreen trees. We do like the idea of more pervious surface on the property and making it safer for the neighborhood by putting the access on the back. That it is a really good solution to conforming with the character of the neighborhood. So we think it complies with all the requirements to grant zoning variance. It's not affecting the light and ventilation of neighboring properties, and we think there's plenty of precedent for for this nonconformance, and since it's a very transparent type of structure, we're hoping that you see it the same way. So I'll wrap it up and entertain any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to staff's report. Ms. Cerniak.
Thank you, Chairman Frankson. It was a very thorough presentation. I'll try not to repeat too much. Just to clarify, although this is a larger project that includes a request for approval of demolition and approval of the design of the new house, the portion that's before the zoning board is simply the request for a variance to allow the open one-story front porch to encroach into the front yard setback. Next week, this entire project will go before the Building Review Board for consideration of the demolition itself and the new construction, and your action tonight will certainly help to inform the Building Review Board's discussion of this particular project. A front yard variance in this particular neighborhood or in other small lot neighborhoods is not unusual. The board has often looked at the pattern of setbacks along the street and allowed these types of setbacks, these types of variances. In this case, you have the existing house, which is much closer to the street than this is. As Mr. Krasnodebski noted, the existing house is about 18 feet from the front property line. In this case, the house will step back. The main mass of the house, the entire house itself, will be conforming to the setback. It's only the 6-foot open front porch that will encroach. As was noted, no other variances are requested. The staff report does provide findings in support of this request, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. So now, now we're going to move on to questions from the board to either the petitioner or staff, and I'll start down this way with Kevin, or yeah. we'll
I
start down.
have no questions.
Here, I'll ask you probably the obvious question is, you know, what prohibited you from not kind of moving this whole thing back 5 feet? And, I mean, you had the room.
Right, we looked at that to try to not ask for a variance, but we've pushed the garage as far back on the lot as it can go. So it's right at the 10-foot setback that's required for the garage. So if we push that any further back, that would require a variance. So that wasn't an option. And we do have to have at least 10 feet of distance between the garage and the home. We have 12 feet, so we could move it 2 feet further, but that would still require a variance on the porch. So we felt that 12 feet was a little more generous distance between the garage and the home, and allows more light into the house itself. So we thought that was not a big compromise to go to 12 from 10. We're at the property line on the north side, so we can't make the house much shallower and wider. I mean, you could make the house wider, but then again, there's that really beautiful southern side yard that is nice to have for the Bruskins as well as the existing neighbor to the south, and not to crowd that. The condition on the north is very similar to what's happening now, even though the existing home is very long that's there, so we are going to decrease the depth of the home, so there will be actually more light, I think, coming into that property to the north, just because it's not a stretched out long house, it's a shallow house. So we did look at it, but with the requirements that exist for the garage and the home, we couldn't make it any wider and to put that porch back into the setback.
Thank you.
I have no questions.
No questions.
Okay. So now we'll move on to public testimony. Anybody wishing to speak on this matter? All righty. No cross-examination. I assume no final questions. Why don't we just move on to final comment and discussion. I'll just give a few thoughts first. I've always thought of this house as the house at the end of the street with a white picket fence where not current owners, I don't think, but the prior owners had kids playing in the driveway with bikes and whatnot with a little fence that safety fence, and you know, my thoughts were always, My, that's pretty close to the street. You know, I was a little surprised that it was kind of designated for a tear down, but that's not our job tonight. I don't have a lot of heartburn on the 5-foot porch because, as was pointed out, you know, we're gaining something with the garage, and the whole building is moving back. But those are just some of my thoughts. Maybe you all have some different thoughts.
Well, the existing structure is at 22 feet over, is that correct?
Yes, 22 feet over, 18 feet from the property line.
And so peeling back to 5 or 6 feet, a 6-foot variance, seems very reasonable to me, especially when you put it in the context of the streetscape, where the house to the south, I believe, has a 22-foot incursion on the setback, and the house to the north is behind the setback. Putting something kind of in between makes a lot of sense from a streetscape perspective.
I don't know that they could add much to what's already been said, but certainly doesn't seem like there's anything negative going on here as far as moving it back. It seems it's better than the current situation, so seems reasonable to me.
I concur. I think they've done everything they could moving it back. They can't move it back any further. They moved the garage back, so I think they tried everything they could, and this is what they're end up with. And I think it's there's no inconsistencies with the neighbors, so.
And it's a nice design. Looks nice. So,
Yeah, it's real nice.
so with that, I don't know that there's much more to discuss. If somebody would like to make a motion on this matter.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval to the City Council for a variance to allow construction of the one-story porch, open front porch, with an encroachment of up to 6 feet into the front yard setback, with the stipulation that the porch shall remain as an open element. This is for the property at 786 Oakwood Avenue.
All right, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion's approved. Congratulations.
Thank you
Good luck
very
with the project. All right. Actually, the next matter on your agenda, number 4, is not going to occur tonight, so we'll disregard the 682 Oakwood Avenue matter. The next item on the agenda is consideration of a request for approval of an amendment to the special use permit for the Winter Club at 956 North Sheridan Road to allow the addition of a paddle court, modification of on-site parking, and incorporation of an adjacent property into the boundaries of the club. The owner is the Winter Club, and a representative is Peter Whitmer, architect. I would ask for any audio-visual issues. Anyway, any declaration of conflicts of interest or ex parte contacts by the board?
None.
All right. If there's anybody intending to testify in the matter, if you're going to testify, you solemnly affirm that the testimony about the given We'll go ahead and start with presentation about
permit in three principal respects. First, to add a fourth paddle court to the existing 3 paddle tennis courts. Second, to include the property at the residence at 936 North Sheridan Road into the Winter Club property and therefore make it a part of the special use permit. And third, to add a walk-in freezer as part of the south end of the existing clubhouse. We're going to divide our presentation into 3 parts this evening. I will address the condition that was stated in the 1991 ordinance, a condition of a request for a 4th paddle tennis court. Mr. Whitmer will address the physical changes to the property that are implicated in this request, and then the general manager of the Winter Club, Neil Smith, will address operational aspects of the club as it pertains to this request this evening. Paddle tennis first was introduced at the Winter Club in the 1970s. It was first made part of the special use permit that was granted in 1976. And at that time, there were 2 paddle courts that had been built. Those 2 courts existed until 1991, when an amendment to the special use permit was granted by the city, which allowed a 3rd paddle tennis court. There were 3 conditions imposed in the 1991 ordinance granting the amendment to the special use permit. Those were, first, that the lighting and the landscaping needed to be approved by the Building Review Board, which was done. And the lights for the paddle courts were required to be turned off automatically no later than 10 p.m., and that particular condition has existed since then to today. The 3rd condition is the condition that I want to address, and that condition is, as it's shown, that the club agrees that they will not request any additional paddle tennis courts in the future, except that if there is a substantial change in facts or conditions, additional courts could be approved. As I would suggest to you, that condition relating to the ability to request a 4th paddle court would, in context, be a change in facts or conditions as it pertains to the club's use of paddle tennis courts, obviously for paddle tennis. The condition is stated in the disjunctive. It can be a substantial change in facts or conditions. I'm going to suggest to you that there have been substantial changes in both facts and conditions which warrant the ability to make this request. And just to be clear, we fully understand and appreciate that this condition pertains to the ability to make the request for the 4th paddle tennis court. If the condition is deemed satisfied, we still have to comply with all of the city's conditions attendant to an amendment to a special use permit, and there are 6 of those. With respect to the changes in facts, and since from 1992 to the present, there has been a 257% increase in the number of men that have registered and play paddle tennis. 28 men in 1992 when the initial amendment was granted for the 3rd court. There are 100 members playing paddle tennis playing members currently, and the same sorts of increase has been experienced with women that play paddle tennis. The increase is 120% from 20 in 1992 to 44 currently. There's also a trend that has existed for the last 3 years, and we would suggest will continue, maybe not to the same percentages that we're showing here, but increase nonetheless. There's been a 54% just in the last 3 seasons alone with men playing paddle tennis, and a 38% in women participation in paddle tennis. Those are just the raw numbers with respect to the number of members that play paddle tennis. An important factual change attendant to this request is teams. There has been a growth both in the community of clubs that play paddle tennis, as well as it being reflected at the Winter Club, where there are more team-sponsored activities. And team activity and team matches are important as it pertains specifically to this request, because a match between two clubs involves 4 individual matches that start typically at 7 p.m. in the evening, other times during the weekend. But for a 7 p.m. match, there would be 4 individual matches that needed to occur for that particular team competition. Currently, what happens at the Winter Club is that there are 3 matches that begin at 7 o'clock. The 4th match has to wait for a court to open. Oftentimes, since matches take from 2 to 2, individual matches take from 2 to 2.5 hours, there's simply not enough time to play that 4th match before the 10 p.m. curfew. So with the addition of a 4th paddle court, all matches can start at 7 p.m. They'll complete in the 2 and 2.5 hours it takes to complete a match, and we're done for the evening. It is not just team paddle tennis that benefits from the additional 4th tennis court. The individual membership will benefit as well, in that drills can be conducted using the 4th tennis court. The court will simply be available for others who want to play paddle tennis, and the demand is greater than the facility currently provides. So I would suggest to you that the participation within the club is more than sufficient to suggest that there has been a substantial change in facts for over the last 25 years that support the ability to request a 4th paddle tennis court. In addition to those changes, in what I would suggest to you would be the facts. There have also been changes in conditions. And I will candidly say some of this information is anecdotal, but I think relevant to the request. First, and it's not anecdotal, there is a community demographic in play here at the Winter Club, and that is the fact that the last 2 census data suggest a 23% decrease in the number of children in the Lake Bluff, Lake Forest communities under the age of 10 years old. Similarly, there's a 36% reduction in the number of adults between the ages of 35 and 44 years old. Those changes result in there being a smaller pool of available members at the Winter Club as family memberships transition as children get older and don't use the club any longer. What has historically occurred at the club is when the children are no longer using the club, the families transition out of the Winter Club, replaced by the newer families that are in the community. We have a smaller pool of available new memberships within the community. Consequently, it becomes important for the club to continue to be able to offer to those adult members really the only solely adult activity that exists at the club, and that is paddle tennis. And with the ability to offer that not only for play, but for teams and leagues, the club is really responding in that respect to a changing demographic within the community and a changing demographic within the club. There's also been a growth of paddle tennis teams generally. In fact, I noted from the minutes of the 1991 meeting, one of the comments that was made at that time, which suggested that there may not be a need for more than 3 paddle courts at that time, is the club's desire not to involve itself in league play, which, as reflected in those minutes, was apparently the consensus throughout the community of paddle tennis playing clubs. Well, in the last 25 years, that's done a 180. There is a dramatic increase in the amount of team paddle tennis play within the Winter Club, reflected by all of the community clubs, and I'm talking both private and public clubs, Park District paddle tennis team club activities that are playing team tennis. And then the fourth bullet point I'm suggesting to you, and this is purely anecdotal, and however, our General Manager Neil Smith can provide plenty of anecdotal information that supports this, is that over the last 25 years, in fact, as I've learned, actually in really increments of 10 years, the skill level of people that play paddle tennis has increased overall fairly dramatically. That increased skill results in longer matches. Longer matches implicate the need for having more facilities that, in this instance, would support the request for the fourth paddle tennis court. So at the conclusion of my portion of the presentation, I would suggest to you that there is sufficient, more than sufficient information to reflect there has been a substantial change in both facts and circumstances supporting the club's ability to request this fourth paddle tennis court. While I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have at this point in time, this doesn't conclude our presentation. I'd like to turn it over, if there are no questions, to Mr. Whitmer. Thank you.
I'm just going to walk through the site plan and the various design elements of this. This is just an aerial of the club itself. Obviously, it's in a residential neighborhood, and it's been in a residential neighborhood since 1902. Our modifications to the site, we have the 3 existing paddle courts that are here, and we're looking to add 1 additional court to the south of that. And basically slide the parking that is existing further north, basically the 30 feet south to accommodate the parking. It's relatively straightforward. We looked at a lot of different alternatives to this. There are some general ideas about paddle. They have to be located in a east-west axis. You can't turn them north and south because of the sun in the winter. So all paddle courts are that direction, so that limits its direction. We also looked at the possibilities of setting it back further or keeping it parallel to the street with the other 3 courts, and we felt that this was the safest and the best use of the land that we have available. The other modifications that we're looking for in this special use is the single-family residence that's tucked behind the existing residence that the club owns on Sheridan Road, and really making modifications there so that instead of parking lot and it being accessed through the other property, that we're able to access it through the club and use its parking area for staff parking, and also allows us to add a cooler, outside cooler to be enclosed in a clapboard skin to match the building to the south of the building, and we were able to move the sidewalk basically around the cooler to the south. These are some streetscape elevations, which I think indicated from property line to property line along the west border. The one below is the existing, so here you see the 3 paddle courts. Here's the existing entrance, and I did mark the drives of the neighbors, the property just to the north and the property across the street's drive, and then the location of the intersection of the triangulation of where the roads come together at the south. And then you can see the modifications up the top. Here's our new court location. Here's our new drive location, about 30 feet south of where it is currently. There is a grove of oak trees there currently, which are in pretty good condition. We have planted some arborvitaes along the existing courts. If these were to be diminished in quality, we would go ahead and plant these underneath those oaks, but we'd like to try to keep those oaks as healthy as we possibly could. The last slide that I have is just a side, the south elevation of the paddle court. Here's the fence line. The trees are actually up out here. A paddle court is about 2'6" off the grade. The fences are 16 feet. Typically, we have green screening on the inside of them. And then the lights, there are 4 lights per side, 8. We're planning on having the same type of lighting that are on the current 3 courts on this 4th court. And they're about a little over 20 feet tall, the 4 light escutcheons. The other elevation here I have is just the south elevation of the cooler, which would match the green siding on the existing building, and then have a little screening on the top. It's got a little compressor that sits on the top, and that would do that. That concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Neil.
Good evening. Neil Smith, General Manager of the club. I'd like to talk about the operations. I've been on board since November of 2013. And when I came on board, this item was one of the issues. We looked at what had happened at the last hearing and the items that came from the neighborhood. General Manager immediately prior to me had already met with Kathy and walked through a lot of those items, and we started instituting new ways to operate. And that started immediately in November. We sent out a letter to our neighbors as well as our members announcing all the upcoming hockey tournaments, and that we were starting to hire parking guards to control traffic. And then we were using a shuttle service, worked with the city to go to Scott Street, the lot at the end of Scott Street, and would have people satellite park there, and we'd run them back and forth down to the club just down Scott Street. It worked out phenomenal. Checked in with Kathy on a regular basis. We had no complaints of anybody parking in the street after the first season. We then continued on this season, did the same thing, sent the letter out announcing when our 3 main tournaments were going to be. Continued with the parking guards, and just continued on with that, and put that into writing in our club, and that's also part of the packet, I believe, Exhibit A. Then we looked at the next thing, and that was sound. That had been an issue in the past. Spoke with Kitty Lansing about it and what her issues were, mostly summertime, and sometimes around the rink. We had a sound system in 2013-14 on the rink, only used for a couple tournaments and our ice show at our annual Winter Carnival. This year, we did not put the sound system up. We used a portable system for 2 tournaments, and then, of course, our 113th annual Winter Carnival for our Learn to Skate ice show. And that has held in during the daytime. Whenever we've used the sound system, we never used it after 9 o'clock since 2013. We then looked at the lighting. Paddle courts are well controlled. There's a timer. We just make sure that whenever there's a power outage, the timer gets updated. And then when there's daylight savings time, the change that happens there. One is to the advantage and one is to the disadvantage, so we stay on top of that. The lights for the ice rinks are manually turned on and off, and the big time when they would burn into the night was when we were building ice. Prior management and facilities directors would build the ice in the middle of the night, so they wouldn't start until 10 o'clock at night, and they'd build the ice all through the evening because it's temperature dependent, and sun, when you're building the ice rinks, are your number 2 nemesis as you go through that process. With our new facility director, Jeff Hayes, that came on board this year, we looked at it in a completely different view. So we started building as soon as the sun went down and temperatures allowed, and our goal was to wrap up by midnight. So the crew could go home and get a good night's rest, wasn't pulling an all-nighter, and it wouldn't encroach on our neighbors. We did very well. We had the lights on only into 2 nights to build our main building of the ice, and we didn't go past 12:30. So we really got very close to the mark for doing it a completely new way. We then looked at putting this all into writing, as I said in the operations manual, and that has played well. It also covers all these items and several other items, like our how we de-ice, when we use the leaf blower, following the city ordinances on the leaf blowers, tennis courts and paddle courts, with the trees that are around them do get debris, so we have to start with a broom, and then once the timing allows for us to put a gas leaf blower out there, we'll put that out there, again, for safety. The other thing we did when building lights, we didn't turn all the lights on. We only used the lights that were needed for a safety factor. And we tried not to have the lights on that face to the west, which goes off towards Stephen Wright's house. And he's got probably the most open exposure there. And talking to Susan Wright, it was much more noticed this year that there was not lights on through the night until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning when the crew was wrapping up. The next thing I want to present is the seasonality of the club. Adding the 4th court really doesn't change our seasonality. The winter season for us is about 125 days long, and that's from when we open the ice to when we close the ice. And paddle takes place a little bit before that and a little bit after that period of time. Summer is really only 100 days for us. And then spring and fall, which is our shoulder season, which is very slow, it's 140 days. So with that seasonality, we're slower for a bigger period of time than we're ever really busy, except it's split into those two shoulder seasons of spring and fall. And during that time, the club almost has no activity other than our preschool, and a little bit of food traffic, a little bit of some kids' events like movie nights and those sorts of things. So I'd like to conclude that. Any questions? Be happy to answer those.
Thank you. We'll come back to you for questions. Okay. Why don't we move on to staff's report? Ms. Cerniak.
Thank you, Chairman Frankson. I'd like to start with just talking about special use permits generally, just a bit of a refresher. Historically, Lake Forest has not adopted zoning districts, institutional districts, or governmental districts, or educational districts. Instead, the city has traditionally allowed uses such as churches, special clubs, schools, museums through the special use permit process. And in my reading as to why that has been the case, I think there's a couple reasons. Because it allows a community discussion about these uses, which are non-residential uses in residential neighborhoods. It allows specific conditions to be put in place and really allows a community dialogue. It also provides the opportunity that as these special uses grow and change to meet current trends or to meet new demands, it allows the opportunity to come before this body to have that discussion again. The Winter Club, like some of the other clubs that were established decades ago, the Knollwood Club, the Onwentsia Club, was established prior to the special use permit process. In the case of all these clubs, special use permits were put in place after the fact, after the clubs already existed. And in the case not too long ago of the Knollwood Club came in for an additional paddle court, came in for some other improvements, and what was done at that time was the series of special use permits that had been granted to the Knollwood Club over time were really put into one new updated special use permit. And that might be something that the zoning board wants to consider at this point with the Winter Club. The request before you for the fourth paddle court, for the incorporation of the one residential property, those in and of themselves aren't significant changes to the club. City staff has heard from a couple neighbors, and as soon as I'm done speaking, I have a couple emails that I want to distribute to you. But we have heard from a couple of the closest neighbors that they do have some remaining concerns. And my takeaway from their comments, again, was that they are perhaps more concerned about current activities of the club and making sure that there are parameters in place than about the specific improvements now proposed. The staff report tries to provide you with history of the club, history of the previous city actions related to the club, and suggests that you continue this item to allow us to work with the neighbors, to work with the petitioner, to perhaps step back and incorporate some of the operational items that the club has already put in place, the operational regulations or practices that they've already put in place. Some of those may be appropriate for you to consider incorporating into the special use permit. So that is the reason to allow, the reason we are recommending a continuance. We did have that request from two neighbors as well. We also heard from a couple neighbors who are in support of the club in general and of the proposed improvements. So there seems to be a mix a mix of feelings in that area. Certainly the club is on a tight site, but it's these types of unique uses that really distinguish Lake Forest from other communities, and they provide challenges to neighborhoods, but they also provide a unique amenity. In your staff report, you do have some fairly detailed recommendations with respect to the conditions that might be put in place for the incorporation of the residential property. That seems a bit more straightforward, a bit more internal to the site. We haven't taken the step of actually looking at a specific landscape plan or any specific conditions that would pertain to the fourth court. But again, we might want to step back and incorporate some overall operational guidelines. So with that, I will turn it back to you for discussion, and I'm going to distribute a map that identifies a bit better some of the neighboring properties. You may hear some references to different addresses, and I believe you have 4 pieces of correspondence, brief correspondence that I'll hand out right now. Thank you.
Okay. So while Kathy's passing those out, what I'm kind of envisioning tonight is, depending on how the board sees it, thank you. Maybe not an action, but more of a working session where we kind of vet out as many of the questions as we can, obviously hear from the neighbors. If there are any, if there's any direction to staff or the petitioner for additional information or whatnot, because there are a number of things going on here, and it just might suit us to kind of have an upload session and then to digest it and come back at a later date and see how it goes. So that's how I'm kind of envisioning this proceeding tonight. But why don't we kind of just dig in and start with any questions from the board to either the petitioner or to staff. Again, we're going to hear from the neighbors in a minute, but why don't we just start with some general questions, and it doesn't either from either side really. I guess I could start. The inclusion of the, I guess this would be to Peter or whoever, the inclusion of the new property. Help me understand that a little bit more. You're building a freezer, an outdoor freezer, and then you're utilizing that new property for what? If you can just kind of give me a master reason for it. You're purchasing that, and what is the long-term vision of that property? Is it going to remain a residence, or do you have other thoughts 5-10 years down the road?
I think right now, we purchased it 5 years ago, I believe. I think it was around 5 years ago. So it's been in the club's existence for a while. The main reason is really to create I think the reason for purchasing was create a buffer in the residential so that we could, we would own the property, the residential properties right next to us. The use of the houses, one was for the clubhouse manager to live in, and I think actually that's going to happen again, which I think is a real benefit actually, to have we're fortunate to have the manager live on site, and I think things come up, he's there, and there's some supervision all the time. And really, if you walk back in the current location, the property is literally, I think, probably 20 feet or 15 feet from this back corner. So it allows us really to expand an area which is really tight in the kitchen by putting a walk-in cooler, which is about 14 feet long and about 8 feet wide, outside, and then gives us a little more space in the kitchen. Also, the trash enclosure that we have that used to be located at the basically property line to the west got relocated in this area, which was a much more beneficial location in terms of basically irritants toward the neighbors and really the function of the club. And then I think the last thing that we do with the parking is that it has a fairly large paved area, and that we can access this. And parking is always difficult and tight in this, so that we can have that as a staff parking area. So I think, I don't know if I can talk about the forever, but I think the short-term idea is to keep it as a residence, keep it as a buffer to the south neighbor, use it as ability to have a general manager live there or someone in staff live in that location. The property that is on Sheridan Road is, I think they're both contributing structures in the historic district. So I think that, modifying them has a lot of governance on it, and that we would need to keep the structures, or, that would go through a serious process. So I think the, 5-year outlook would be that they would both stay residents. It makes a lot of sense that the inboard one becomes the use of the club so that we can access a little bit of the north side of the property for the club use.
May I ask a follow-up? Peter, could you just review what the current road access to 936 is and what the proposed access route would be to a proposed new employee parking lot?
Sure. The current access is down basically a road that runs along the north side. The new access would be basically putting a gate in the fence so that you would come down our driveway and then go in this way so that you wouldn't have to come down the road to get to it. This residence has an easement, a driveway easement down through the north side. It just makes a lot safer situation for that.
So the driveway would be closed off with a fence at the end? Is that
right? The driveway, we would close this off and then open it up from the north side, which there's a fence that runs between the two properties right now.
And that would also be the route for garbage collection, trash collection?
Right. We would have the garbage collection comes in here and we'll pick that up. And they have it on rollers and come out that way too.
Okay. If you wanted to keep going, I have another question.
No, keep going.
Switching gears a little bit, back in 2012, I remember that there was some neighborhood concern about, among other things, parking on Wisconsin Avenue. And in the staff report, I note a comment that says the club has improved education and enforcement efforts to discourage parking on Wisconsin Avenue. I wonder if you might address specifically what's happened.
Sure.
Since
And I think
2012.
when we made our presentation, I think everybody became aware of a lot of things that the club could do better. And so one was that to put physical barriers, one is education of the members, tell them you can't park there. Two is to put physical barriers.
Well, if I may interrupt, how is that education? I mean, did you have a lecture, or did you hand out something in writing?
I am a member of the club, and I do play paddle there. And I'm not sure how I got educated, but it was if you park there, you got serious problems.
That sounds
That's really
that sounds like your school history, but
yeah. But I mean, I'm not sure what the vehicle was that you notified everybody. Maybe
As each tournament comes up, or where we know we're going to have a heavy use, I send out an email to the membership reminding them that we'll have the parking guards, the shuttle will be available. And this is really only pertains to when we have hockey, the big hockey tournaments, where the teams are just rotating in and out, basically on every 2 hours. And so that's what we did. Then we actually have physical, red-coated staff out there. It says guard on the back of it. Just like we have a rink guard, we have parking guards. And we station them at the Sheridan Road entrance, and we station them back there. They have full radio communication. They can say, you know what, go around back. We've got a spot for you there. No, we don't have any spots. Please go to Scott Street. And then we give them a map. And they head right up there, and we radio the shuttle driver, and the shuttle driver picks them up, brings them down. So it's made parking much more efficient. Members know they don't even have to pull in. They don't even get a turnaround situation. We've already stopped them before they've even pulled in and are trying to back out on the street.
Is this guard situation new since 2012?
Yeah, we did it in 2013. Is the starting of the hockey season 2013 is when we introduced this whole new program, and it's run very well for the last 2 years, and will continue to run under the same operation style.
Very good, thank you.
Well, some questions this end of the table. Or this end.
One question is is one of the main issues here that because of demographics that the membership is declining or possibly declining, and you really need the paddle tennis. which is the hot part, I guess, of the situation, that to bring in more membership and keep the club healthy. And
Well, what's happened is really since the demographics have changed, but also how members are using their club. A lot of our members originally were there for 10 to 15 years, and as the children aged out, then they moved on to the area country clubs. Well, we're finding a lot of our membership, we are their only club and will be their only club. They're not moving on to Knollwood on Wensia and having a second club. So they are looking for a club that they can continue to use even though the children age up through. Now, we've changed our programming, and we've built a lot of programming around right now our 10 to 14-year-olds, and we'll be introducing a community service programming for our high schoolers next year. So we're always ebbing and flowing and morphing ourselves to fit what the membership needs are. And the paddle has just grown. I mean, you look at paddle across the United States, just growing. And it's just a natural thing. It's gotten to this point here in Chicago. I believe in the report we showed some of the national numbers and the regional numbers of the growth of the sport. And it has just become ingrained. If you don't play paddle, it's like, what are you doing? And so that's just become a new culture. It was tennis, that was tennis 25 years ago. We're starting to see tennis creep back up and growing as well. Does that help?
You mentioned earlier that you've been using a portable sound system. And that is replacing what?
There was actually, for years, there was a permanent speaker that was placed out right on the hut of the scorers, and it was 2 large speakers that was put out there. It had a radio hookup to it, had a microphone hookup to it. Prior to me getting there, I'm sure the staff just turned the radio on to entertain themselves versus who may have been, if anybody was even on the ice rink at the time. There was also speakers all through the property outside, and I think at one point there was a lot of music and that was played through it. This spring, when we were taking the rinks down, we took all the speakers down that were on the tennis court and right there by where the ice rinks are in the tennis court. So we took that whole group down. They had not been used in several years, and so we just took that hardware down. And have not used since 2013 any of the outside sound system other than the little bit in that 2013 that was still already up when I got there on the hockey. And then we do have a small announcer that says, Mr. Culbertson, your food order's ready, that we announced from our snack shop.
Question for staff. Could you refresh me on what, if any, ordinance pertains to this property with respect to amplified sound?
Because it is a special use permit, it would be appropriate to address that in the special use ordinance itself. Because this special use permit has been instituted incrementally, there really isn't a series of operational regulations in this special use permit. The city's sound regulation in general for residential properties is no amplified sound. In fact, that also applies to our commercial business district. The other portion of our noise ordinance says something like no unreasonable noise that disturbs neighboring properties, or I don't have the language right, but that's when it becomes a police matter. When you have a party at 1 in the morning, that's a different issue.
Does the Winter Club currently have authority to, legitimate authority to use amplified sound?
I don't believe there's any specific statement in the ordinance that's currently in place, and any of the ordinances that are currently in place that speak to sound.
Well, this is an R3 residential district too, so there couldn't be any, ordinarily any allowance of amplified sound on a regular basis.
And yet there is.
And the special use permit, the frequency of amplified sound has certainly been reduced, but the special use permit could be crafted in a way that speaks specifically to when amplified sound could be used, how loud it could be.
Okay.
I guess your
whether
question
it
though is
needs
it
to be
allowed now?
portable
Yeah,
or
exactly.
permanent.
That's what you're getting at.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm curious, are they technically, do they have permission to use amplified sound?
I think because the special use permit
The existing one?
The existing special use, there's a number of ordinances that authorize the operation of the club. They speak broadly and authorize the club. If we were looking at this as a new use today, we do special use permits very different today than we did in the 1970s. So I think under the current special use permit, it speaks broadly to the fact that the club is authorized. So I don't think there's anything in here that says they can't have amplified sound, but it's something that isn't really addressed.
Follow-up item, for sure.
Follow-up item.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question for Kathy. Are there any other special use permits out there that have conditions that allow amendments based on substantial changes in facts or conditions?
I can't think of another condition that I've seen that is exactly like that. I think those are the kind of conditions that today we would think very carefully before putting that type of language in an ordinance, because it does cause confusion down the road. So no, I can't think of, there might be other SUPs out there that have strange conditions. I haven't come across one quite like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for staff. You had alluded in the beginning that there were a number of different special uses or ordinances that relate to the club. Do we have access, or can you provide those so that we can somehow understand what the rules that have been laid out for the club are already? And then perhaps that can be part of what we're looking at as well, is to understand what their, I think that ties into what
Do we have an outline of the current special use permit or any ordinance that's,
Yes, in the staff report, it reviews that, and it's really those three conditions.
there's
Well-
nothing else.
The special use permit that authorized the pre-existing club in the 70s didn't include any conditions at all. It authorized the club broadly, which goes to Commissioner Pickus's question. And then in 1991, the fourth court was approved with those three conditions. BRB review of landscape and lighting, turn off the lights at 10 p.m., and then a fourth court couldn't be requested unless there was a substantial change in circumstances. So only those three conditions. That's why I'm suggesting that it might be appropriate to step back and do a more comprehensive special use permit that picks up some of the very operating procedures that the club has already put in place.
and we're going to do that. I think what you're asking, and but I'm going to ask if it's possible to, I don't think it's in here, if we could get a copy of the actual SUP or the ordinance for the next meeting. I think that would be helpful to kind of
Sure, we can do that.
red line before, after, whatnot, and if that's where we're going, so. We're going to come back for more. Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of anxious to hear from, for the public testimony portion of this, and I think that's where we will move. So we're going to move to public testimony. Anybody wishing to give some testimony on this, we'd ask you to limit it to 5 minutes. That's our rule. And one at a time, and if you just state your name and address, that would be appreciated. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Bob Long. I'm an attorney.
Actually, if you could speak into the mic, start over. Thank you.
Start over again?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Bob Long. I represent Fred and Laura Fellows, who maintain a residence directly across the street from the paddle courts. I'm here to speak against this petition. What I've heard tonight, and I've listened pretty carefully, is what's good for the club. And we haven't heard anything that has been not good for the club. What we have heard is that the club thinks that some of these things won't be adverse to the neighbors. I don't think that's really true. You remember back when, and we, you gentlemen certainly in this town of all places will know about financial performance, and past performance is maybe not a great indicator of future, promise of future, but it tells you what the way in which they're going to do their business. We saw the chart, 257% increase in men over the last 10 years playing paddle tennis. We've seen the growth of hockey tournaments that they've talked about. In the summer, it's other instances, the swimming. What you have is an overall expansion of this operation, which, they're adding additional property, try to streamline it, figure out how to manage the people that are flowing in and around it. The difficulty, of course, is that you have a footprint, and you have a footprint that lives within a residential area. And what my clients are looking for is something that's good for their neighborhood. They like to be good neighbors. They, they've contributed to this community for a long time. Laura runs the little sweet shop where I got this stupid piece of peanut butter cookie stuck in my teeth, excuse me. The point of an SUP is that it's a balance. It's trying to achieve a balance on certain conditions between what a particular land user wants to use and what everybody around them needs to have happen to maintain their lifestyle. The club is the outlier. It's not the core of this community. The community is the residents. And ultimately, the real question here is, what are they asking? They're asking to be freed, essentially, from their own promises and contracts that they made back in 1991. The nature of the proposed changes they're going through, their promises were made. No teams, no interleague play. Well, you've seen that they've explained, well, we've got demographics that things are changing, so we need to change. But the point that they're looking at in that language that is somewhat ambiguous suggests that, well, any change. Well, is that really right? Is that really what was intended? And is that really fair? Because the change question to me is more like the ordinary LaSalle factors that you guys see on a regular ordinary zoning case. The question is, was this change something that was engendered by outside forces? You're looking for a variance. Why? Because there was a problem that existed when I bought the property. I'm trying to fit it in. I need to do something very specific. I need to add a handicap ramp, and I don't have room in my front yard without encroaching on it. Those are changes that are outside of your direct control, and those are things that you're looking at as being the reason. Here, what you have is, we're changing. We're changing, so we'd like to just change everything. Well, the problem is they're already telling you, and there aren't any promises in their application. I've looked for them. They don't say that with 4 courts, that's all we'll ever need, or that we will limit ourselves to a 50 or 25 or 75 or whatever the number is of teams. They don't say that. They just say it'll be more operationally smooth for us to operate at this point in time. Well, that's true. That may be true. Maybe they can fit it in. But like a 5-year-old that gets a new pair of shoes that are a size 7 and he's been wearing 6s, they might last him for a while, but he's going to need a pair of 8, 9, 10s before he grows up. And that's really the point. You've got to achieve some kind of a balance here, because you've got adverse impacts on the lives of the neighbors and the quality of life with that. Now, we've heard a lot about, the one thing we have heard is that the paddle is for adults. If they would act like adults, it might be a little different issue. But the reality is, living next to a bunch of guys that have a drop shot, and the first thing that comes out of their mouths is a screamed obscenity, that's understandable if you're on the court and you're playing, I guess. But when you're living across the street trying to have a party with your 4 or 5, 6-year-old kids, that's not so great. And that's the kind of impact that this is. What I would suggest, and Fred couldn't be here tonight. He wanted to be here, but he was coming back from Florida, so he asked me to come by. Is I would suggest, indulge me for just a moment, that if you're going to continue this, let us submit a written explanation of the kind of impact it has on their lives.
Thank you. Next person wishing to offer testimony.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Susan Loicano. I live at 305 Scott Street in Lake Forest, about 4 or 5 houses west of Winter Club at their back entrance on Wisconsin Avenue. I've been a resident for 7 years and most recently served on the Winter Club Board of Governors from 2011 to 2014 and served as the chair of membership during that time and was on the executive committee when many of the changes that you've heard about tonight were implemented. I'm here to make a very brief comment on the side of support for the project from the standpoint of the neighbors. I think what Winter Club has done in the last couple of years to operationalize these changes is very important. 10 o'clock, the lights turn out, whether you want to, continue to play or not. Staff are present at 8 o'clock in the morning so that paddle players are not allowed to enter the courts before then. And in the 2.5 years since all of this came to be, I have not seen a car parked on Wisconsin Avenue, mostly because there's a parking attendant there most Saturday mornings, a hockey tournament or not. There is a strong presence, especially in the back of the property, ensuring that it's not overcrowded and that paddle players and families can safely get into the parking lot and out of the parking lot, and there aren't any children present running around. So I just want to also make a brief comment to share that Mr. Smith's comments earlier about paddles' rise in popularity among the club really can't be understated. This is really where Winter Club's real focus is from the part of members with older children, and it really needs to create an environment that encourages our members to stick around, and the fourth paddle court is an important part of that strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Terry D., and I am at 190 North Ahwahnee, which is not near the Winter Club, but I'm on the board of the Winter Club, and I thought it'd be helpful for the committee to hear from the perspective of the board about some of these issues, and I just want to make 3 points. One is, when we went through this process in 2012 and saw the comments that were coming from the neighbors, we hit the pause button. We knew it was important at that point to step back and, from a board's perspective, from a membership perspective, take into account those concerns that we're hearing, in large part that had nothing to do with the fourth paddle court, but had to do with other aspects of the club. And we did that, and we understood that we needed to be proactive about that. And so we made that a priority, and we directed the club's manager at the time to take the steps to address the noise and the lighting and the landscaping, other concerns that were raised by the neighbors. And you heard about those from Neil Smith earlier. As a result, at least anecdotally, you can say we've had fewer complaints from neighbors from the club. The second point is that we're committed to do even more and even better going forward. This is not something that we are doing right now for this purpose. We are committed to continuing the dialogue with neighbors. We feel we have done well as a board in addressing the concerns. We know we can do better by continuing to have a dialogue, find out what the concerns are of the neighbors, and to address those concerns going forward. And third, this is an issue that really is addressed, that really has been driven by membership. From the board's perspective, we are seeing how the demographics have changed. We are hearing from our members about what they want to do. And to address Commissioner Kennedy's comment, our membership is strong, but we also are seeing this need to address concerns of having more activities for adults. The paddle court serves, the paddle program serves that need. And I don't want to get to the point, the board doesn't want to get to the point where, because we can't afford, we don't have the facilities to meet that need. And that's the case right now. 3 paddle courts is insufficient to address the need that we have right now for the members, that in fact maybe we will lose membership. With the demographics that we have, with reduced numbers of children under 10 in the Lake Bluff and Lake Forest area, the key is to then if it's harder to get more neighbors or more members in that demographic, that you keep the members you have longer. And from the board's perspective, in looking at this and looking at all of our options, the fourth paddle court is a very important aspect of that. So thank you for giving me that time.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Charlie King. I'm at 757 Valley Road. I'm a Winter Club member as well, and a paddle player, active community member here in Lake Forest, part owner of a business here, headquartered here, so very involved in the community. And I think when I think about the Winter Club, I do think about community. And it's been here for 113 years. It was really part of the fabric of Lake Forest, a very unique club. When I moved here with our family 10 years ago, we really didn't know anybody in that club. And through the membership and through our kids' involvement in the programs and my involvement in paddle, the other Winter Club members now are some of my best friends I have in Lake Forest. Not Terry, but a lot of other folks are. But and I think the changes we've made the last few years really helped address a lot of the concerns. And as Mr. D did say, all kidding aside, we're going to continue those efforts to keep the noise down, to be a good neighbor. I think our actual purchases of the two houses 5 years ago spoke to that commitment, a chance to actually not expand footprint per se, but actually to create a buffer to help the rest of the community. That's what we're all about here at the Winter Club. And while we've done well the last few years of membership, we really struggled in the downturn. We lost membership, and our finances were not on great terms at that point. And so we need, as Terry spoke to, we need these paddle courts to have older members like myself. My kids now are older in high school, and they just do not use the club as much. If not for paddle, folks like me getting up there in ages just would not use the club and would drop the membership, really hurting the club's financial situation. So it really is very, very important for the Winter Club to maintain its presence by offering this expanded program to the membership. So in closing, our General Winter Club membership is very supportive of this, and we really appreciate your consideration to make this change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jennifer. Is this on?
Yep.
Mauer. I live at 709 Beverly Place in Lake Forest. I have been on the board for the past 7 years. I've been a member of the club for over 10 years. I actually grew up going to the club as a child. My parents are still members. So it is very important to me. And since I've been a member, have seen the dramatic increase in paddle, not only with the men and women, but now the kids are playing too, which I think is important. And I think that having this fourth paddle court will enable play time to be shorter without staggering the play times with the men's and the women's league play. And I also think it will help both the Fellows and the Dixons. I think it's nice to have the driveway to the back entrance of the club moved up the certain number of feet towards the fork in the road where Wisconsin and Church and Scott Street come into play. I don't think, being a board member, I don't think we realized until we came forward 3 years ago that there were any concerns with neighbors. And I know that this current board, the future board, the staff, we're committed to being good neighbors. And we do, as Terry said, want to listen to our neighbors and address all concerns they have. And we're committed to doing that. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public testimony? All right. So now we'll move on to, I don't think there's any rebuttal or any other, why don't we kind of, I'm going to go by the book here. Any other final questions? We'll come back for kind of general comments, but are there any final questions from the board to the petitioner or staff?
I just, as someone who has never played paddle, I'm just trying to get an understanding of, I think it was Mr. O'Donnell commented on the challenges of hosting league play with other clubs with only 3 courts. I guess how much of paddle play is league play versus how much is just men and women in the club playing against each other? Or is that how paddle is played? Or is it typically tournament style? I'm just trying to get an idea of how significant league play is to the fourth court.
We do have play that takes place just members among members. They'll hold just an internal tournament or set of matches. But the majority of the play is league sort of play, just like if you're in a tennis league, that sort of thing. So we do have that both on the men and the women's front. The women play during the daytime. The men traditionally play at nighttime.
So did I catch a percentage there? Regular play versus league play, rough number.
I would say that the majority of the adults are playing. The 100 players, probably 80. I know probably 80 guys are on the leagues, and so really the main reason that you play is because you're playing in the leagues. Leagues play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights, and then the women play on Wednesday and Friday, and then there's practice on Saturday for the men, and the women Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday practice during the day. So I would say, if I had to generalize, maybe 80% is league play for adults, and then I think there's just fill in with kids in the programs that they have with the club.
All right. Any final questions, Kevin?
Which properties does the club own that have been highlighted on our maps?
Maybe if you could put that map back up, and Peter, with that red marker, if you could just kind of.
Yeah. The club, the original boundaries were, I'm just following it around here, and then 5 years ago they bought this house, 944, and then 936.
And what's the current use of both of those two properties today?
Single-family residence. One's rented out to, you have a tenant in the one, and then the other one, I believe, is vacant until Neil's moving into it, just currently. And the past general manager lived in the back product, and you had a tenant in it. So it's been single-family residence.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Would the petitioner, does the petitioner desire rebuttal not to exceed 10 minutes?
Mr. Chairman, assuming that you're not closing the public hearing, what I would ask is that I reserve rebuttal until the next hearing, and that would give us an opportunity to address. I heard that there may be some written comments and impacts being submitted, and it would give us an opportunity to address anything that's raised between now and then. That's okay with the
I
board?
anticipate that we're going to continue this, but if we don't, we'll offer you a rebuttal. How about that?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Staff response to public testimony, if any.
I'll take the liberty of not responding to public testimony, but just asking for some specific discussion from the zoning board. First on, are you comfortable that you've been presented with substantial facts and conditions that support the club's request for the fourth paddle court? Since, again, that condition was worded, as I think you've heard several times, a bit awkwardly, but from the staff's perspective, there certainly has been a change in facts and conditions, and it seems appropriate to allow them to present the request as we've done. What you do with it is really a separate matter. So I guess I just look for consensus on that, so we can kind of set that condition aside. And then second, just some further direction. It sounds like the direction you're going is that we may want to come back to you again after talking with neighbors, talking with the petitioners, with a more detailed outline of a new special use permit that really lays out the various uses, types of activity that occur on the property. And again, we have to strike that balance between being too too restrictive, and certainly providing some flexibility, but enough assurance to the neighbors that things aren't going to be out of control on the site. And then in addition to detailing the uses, also coming back with some use parameters for the site. So there's a little bit more framework around what is actually permitted. So I just appreciate some input on whether what I've heard so far, what I'm taking away, is the direction you would like us to go in. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So now why don't we circle back to a board discussion. As you can see, this is not your typical garage replacement. Whoever would like to start with, and we could be kind of free form and come back, and there's no strict.
Yeah, I don't know, specific question, but this one comment from Mr. Fellows in here, he says that the club has turned a quaint neighborhood club into a circus. You know, I'd like to better understand what exactly is going on. What does that mean? I mean, what's specifically happening? Is it really a significant issue, or not? And from some of the other neighbors, I mean, is this a problem? And if it is a problem, is it going to be any worse by the extra tennis or paddle court? I'm a little not sure I fully understand how bad of a situation this might be, like this particular comment. It's not clear to me at all.
Okay. So we've got the circus issue.
I'd like more input maybe from some other neighbors or whatever as to really what's going on here.
Well, I don't know that we can force input from other neighbors, but I suppose we could find out if they've been notified and had the opportunity to speak. I mean, silence is oftentimes, we have to gauge that is that they have no opposition to it, but if they haven't been notified or they're not aware of it, clearly some of these neighbors have been notified, but I guess staff has notified the neighbors. There is a formal process. They've had a chance to.
Yes, the petitioner provided notice, formal notice to the neighbors. The city did a follow-up courtesy notice to the neighbors. We did publish notice of the hearing. We did post the agenda at 5 public places. And then I also understand that that perhaps Mr. Smith reached out individually to several of the closest neighbors. So notice was provided, and we did hear from 4 neighbors that used our correspondence, and then a few more.
Does the city get complaints from neighbors about the club? Or
in 2012, the city did get complaints. We received frequent complaints about noise, about lights, and particularly about parking on Wisconsin. And I will say, and I've checked with the police department as well, that since the changes in 2013, we have not received complaints.
So things are like better.
That's our sense, is that things are better. We do know that the parking on Wisconsin was a huge issue, and that simply isn't happening anymore, to the best of my knowledge.
I was present in 2012, and there were a lot of neighborhood objections to activity at the club. And I would have to say that I believe the club has been, and its board has been proactive in addressing these concerns. I think they've listened, and I think they've responded in good measure. Portable sound system, revised the lighting at the ice skating rink, low leaf blower ordinances, selective lighting around the property, parking guards. None of these were in existence in 2012. So I think they have been responsive. I would encourage the objecting neighbors to, unless they're just going to, in a wholesale fashion, object to the petition in its entirety, I would encourage them to develop some constructive conditions that might be, that they might like to see imposed on the club. You know, a lot of the stuff that Mr. Fellows refers to in his letter has already happened. I mean, the swim meets, the hockey meets, the hockey tournaments, and you know, one of the one of the things that the petitioner actually opens themselves up to is a revision of all aspects of a special use for this property. So this is an opportunity for objecting neighbors to come forward with some thoughts on additional conditions they might like to see incorporated into the special use permit that could address their concerns. And then it would be up to all of us working together to decide whether they're acceptable or not. But I would, rather than just outright object, I think the objecting neighbors would be well served to try and get constructive with the process and offer some conditions they might like to see incorporated. Also, I would like to see some clarification of how amplified sound, if any, can be used on the property. I think that's kind of fallen through the cracks here and should be addressed directly. And and I think that summarizes my thoughts for now, Mr. Chairman.
Lewis?
I think we have to do something about the substantial change in facts or conditions clause.
Like what?
Somehow change it, strike it, be more specific. I think it's just way too vague and it's open to interpretation.
Well, I think that clause, if I understand right, it kind of exists in some existing ordinance, does it not? That's
it's
the
in the
reason.
SUP, the 90,
Yeah.
91 SUP.
We'll continue on. I'll follow up.
No, I just think that, I mean, we've heard the petitioner's interpretation of what substantial change in facts and conditions are. Sounds like staff agrees. I'm not saying I disagree. I just think it's really vague, and I'm sure that there's some neighbors out there that probably disagree that this is a substantial change in facts or conditions, and I just think I would like to see it maybe tidied up a little bit.
Chairman, can I jump in on that topic? I share some of Commissioner Pickus's thoughts about that, in that how did the statement such as that come to be? And I know, Kathy, you've looked at that. Maybe you can share with us, or if there's an opportunity to understand, because sometimes it's the intent that maybe got lost in the wording of what was created, that if we can understand perhaps a little bit better the intent of it, you can then, from the record that existed in 1991, we can then at least better be able to go forward and either use that as our basis for making a decision, or if necessary, as you indicate, to perhaps reword it or to clarify it in some way. But it's I feel at this point that we just have a statement that is a bit ambiguous. And I agree with you, somewhat hard to enforce in a way as to why that would be the statement that anybody would agree to at the beginning. We would never ask for an additional court.
Special use permits can be modified at any time. I mean, so I don't know why we need to have a clause in there that says if things change. Sure, things change all the time.
And my expectation is, if you direct us to come back to you with a reworked special use permit, that condition wouldn't be out there. I have reviewed the record, and it appears that the Winter Club at that time simply wanted the third court and basically said, this is all we think we ever want to do. I would hope that a zoning board today wouldn't accept that kind of condition, but I think sometimes that happens. Someone, looks just short term and says, if you give me this, I'll promise never anything else. There really was no more in the record than that.
Okay.
So I have a list of like follow-up items. I think I heard tonight. I want to list them and hear if the board heard the same thing. I think we'd like that the substantial change clause, would just like to see what that was, where that came from, number one. The amplified sound issue, where is that coming? Does that exist? Is it in the existing SUP? Is it non-existent, just applicable to the R3 zoning district? Number three is the an actual copy of the existing SUP ordinance. would be good. Number 4 is something I heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, was a promise by the club about no teams or interleague play. Did that really exist? Is that a promise that was made? And then 5 down here, I have circus, but I'm not sure where I was going with that. That's probably not a homework item. That's maybe just a just kind of an open-ended invitation for all parties to say, look, either it is something that's really inconsistent with the neighborhood, or it's not. So I've got really 4. Maybe there are other follow-up items, kind of homework items that we'd like to see staff or the petitioner come back with. Well, anyway, hold that thought for a second. Just a few thoughts on our Mark, did you have any comments yet, or? No, want me to come back to you?
Oh, no, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, the 1991 SUP is almost intentionally vague to the way it's written, and it really leaves it up to us to kind of make that determination. But at the same time, I don't think it, it clearly states in there that additional courts could be approved under, a substantial change in facts or conditions. So, it appears to me that with some clarification from staff on what the original 91 SUP said with that.
I think we just ought to read it.
Yeah,
we ought to
I
read
guess
the
that
actual
would be helpful,
SUP.
right.
That would be probably a place to start.
But at the same time, I think, everything, what I liked about what I heard here tonight was, I agree with, I believe it was Commissioner Pickus who commented on whatever was done after 2012 in terms of, and I don't know if the credit goes to the general manager or what, but the steps that were taken, it seems like things have really improved over there since then, and whether it's the operations manual or what have you, and I think that is encouraging to hear, as well as, and I'm not sure who made the comment about working with neighbors who do have further concerns, and that being an important part of this whole process is, whoever this may affect, if we can take steps to address that so it works for everybody. So that's...
Okay, good. Just a few thoughts. Look, it's a tight site, as was already said. It's not like you're going to take a prospective 4th court and put it somewhere else. It looks like there's going to be a 4th paddleball court that's going to be right there, and you're going to move the parking. I'm not really all that concerned about the substantial change issue. I mean, I think where they were going was, look, there's more paddle players than there were in the past. Yeah, I'm sure there is. Okay. If you want to call that substantial change, that's fine. I think things like the sound system, well, that's fixable. The street parking, that's fixable. You just enforce it. It's something like a permanent improvement, like a paddle, another paddle court. That's not fixable if you make the wrong decision. And I think we can talk about all these issues, but what I think this really comes down to with this board is the 7 conditions of approval under a special use permit. Is this going to qualify or is it not? And that's just where I think that's our job here. We've asked some very good questions. Obviously, the Winter Club is a wonderful institution. They've been here a long time. The neighborhood, the neighboring homeowners know that the Winter Club existed and since early 1900s, I guess. So, that's probably going to be our job, and we'll just see where it goes. I think we've asked some good questions. We've directed staff at some good homework items for next time. And but any other thoughts? You look like something's ready to just pop out.
I've spoken my piece.
No? All right. How about down here?
Well, I think you put it well. I think this really comes down to the second item, and that's that the special use shall not be injurious to the neighbors or to the enjoyment of the property around the vicinity. And that's really what I think it's all coming down to, that how can the Winter Club operate? I don't believe anybody, and nothing I've heard here tonight has indicated that the Winter Club can't exist. It's just how it exists and what it does, and at what level we, the city, can regulate it, and where do we draw that line? And perhaps that line was drawn at a different place in 1991, and we need to just perhaps redraw that, but not without overstepping it, trying to codify, if you will, the parts that would limit the impact on the neighbors.
Yep.
That's what I hear going on, so I think that's in line with what you're saying.
All right.
Are we continuing right back from earlier in the meeting, or?
I'm going to suggest to the board that if we have exhausted all of our board comment now, doesn't appear that we're ready to take an action on this, I would suggest that it might be appropriate to continue to the next meeting. I think we're going to have one in June, I think.
We'll do a poll to make sure
Yeah.
in the next couple days.
Date uncertain, summer vacations, whatever. So would somebody like to make a motion to continue this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt recommendation number 1 in the staff report, which states, continue the petition to allow the board to consider and fully understand the information presented, to allow time for staff to prepare responses to any questions raised by the board, and to provide the opportunity for further conversations between the club and neighbors.
And that's fine, and I guess I would ask, have we asked the petitioner to, were all of our questions for staff, or was there anything for the petitioner to come back to us as well? I'm just thinking out loud.
Staff will coordinate with the petitioner and also invite comments from the neighbors.
And maybe to coordinate with the petitioner as necessary and additional information or something like that. If that's your...
Amending the motion that staff will coordinate with the petitioner on questions and comments raised by the board.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you very much. Thank you for everybody's testimony, and we'll see you next month or at a date uncertain. The last item on the agenda is, next to last item, opportunity for the public to address the Zoning Board of Appeals on matters not on the agenda. Any additional information from staff?
Only to reiterate that in the next couple days, Michelle Frederick will email you and ask for your availability for the next 3 meetings.
Very good.
We formally welcome.
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Mr. Pasquesi.
I'd like to formally welcome Board Member Pasquesi. Would you like to give us a quick bio, if you limit it to 30 minutes, you know?
It is an honor to be here and be a part of this board, working alongside such esteemed colleagues as yourself. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
I think we're going to like this guy.
Too kind. Too kind. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? We adjourn.